India, by contrast, is already aligned with global tripling ambition, having set a 500 gigawatt renewable energy goal by 2030, backed by its national electricity plan. But a lot more can be done by India as well. This kind of underscores the urgency. Transition planning isn't just symbolic, it's strategic. Clear, ambitious, and integrated national target serves, as signals to investors and partners, helping to close the investment gap, as well as keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway within reach. So robust transition plans definitely are foundational, but they turn NDC targets into more actionable, investable roadmaps that can mobilize public and private capital in an increasingly challenging geopolitical context. We have seen different countries, undertaking different steps, whereas Indonesia has launched its Energy Transition and Green Economy Task Force. India, as I already mentioned, has 500 gigawatt, but 600 gigawatt target by 2032, as well as more ambitions on 24/7 clean energy, grid modernization. South Africa, on the other hand, has come up with just Energy Transition Partnership, which is delivering policy and infrastructure reforms. So it's not only about sustainability, it's also about equity along with economic growth. So today we'll hear it from different speakers, including voices from these regions and a multilateral development bank perspective. Now I'm delighted to hand it over to Madhura Joshi from E3G, who will kick off our panel discussion. So we have 3 rounds of questions for our distinguished panelists, followed by a chance to engage via the Q&A box. I will encourage all of you to please submit your questions in the Q&A box anytime. Lastly, the session is being recorded and we'll share the recording with all the participants. With this, I'll hand it over to you, Madhura.
Thank you so much, Vibhuti. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining in for the webinar today. We have really a great set of panelists. And without sort of further ado, before we start with the discussions, I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists. From South Africa, we have Mr. Muktazi Steleki, Director, Climate Change Developments and International Mechanisms from the Department of Fishery, Forest and Environment, Government of South Africa. Mr. Steleski's experience and knowledge covers across training, trade relations, and economic development, international finance, renewable energy, as well as research and project oversight for NDC. The scope of his work encompasses negotiating on carbon markets and climate change under the UNFCCC and other fora such as G20, particularly looking at the Climate and Environment Working Group, BRICS, and more. Joining us from Indonesia today are Mr. Paul Butar. He's the head of the Indonesia's JETP Secretariat. Paul has more than 32 years of professional experience and has been involved in various sectors such as transportation, energy-related air pollution, municipal solid waste, renewable energy, and climate change. He's provided inputs to government institutions in Indonesia, MDBs and international organizations, and the private sector. From India, we have Mr. Ravi Prasad. He's Distinguished Fellow with Council for Energy, Environment, and Water in his current role. Mr. Prasad has a 34-year track record in the Indian Civil Services, including as the Additional Secretary with the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change. He's played a pivotal role in shaping India's climate policies and has led Indian delegations to UNFCCC negotiations, contributed to the development of the Paris Agreement and its implementation mechanisms, worked on India's first NDCs, and has also spearheaded national initiatives such as India's National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change and National Clean Air Program. And finally, we have Mr. Brendan Coleman joining us from ADB, who's a climate change specialist with ADB's Climate Change and Sustainable Development Department. Mr. Coleman works on ADB's engagement with climate change mitigation with the aim to support the goal to provide $100 billion of climate finance by 2030. Mr. Brendan has over a decade of experience supporting low carbon policy and investment projects across Asia, Africa, Europe, and manages ADB's NDC Advanced Technical Assistance platform. We have a great set of speakers and really excited to dive into the discussions. So maybe we'll start with you, Mr. Steleki. Uh, South Africa has recently come out with its draft NDCs, in which it targets 36 gigawatts of new renewables by 2035. Emerging and developing economies have a dual goal of ensuring just clean energy transitions while meeting development and growth needs. What does the RE target in South Africa's plan mean for South Africa's power sector decarbonization goal? And what, according to you, is needed domestically to ensure alignment between international commitments, national and subnational targets to enable finance mobilization and accelerated implementation? Mr. Steleki, if I could request you to turn on your camera and start.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. It couldn't have come at a better time than now, especially that there's a very strong, expectation for various countries to submit their commitments. Indeed, in our case, the cabinet did approve the draft upon which we should unfold stakeholder consultations. So it's still a draft at the moment, and we hope to finalize it and have it submitted either by United Nations General Assembly, where there could be a pronouncement, or even a later submission, depending on the processes. With regard to the specific question on the renewable energy target, for us, we view this within the context of the vision in pursuit of just transition towards lower carbon economy and climate resilient society. This is because we are cognizant of the nature of our emissions profile, which is dominated largely by emissions from electricity. And with that target, we do know that what is being proposed at the moment, not yet concluded, it's proposed for 2035, will be informed by the alignment to other core policies, like your integrated resource plan for the electricity sector, which actually espouses a mix in terms of our energy, including renewables, but also the base load, because of this notion that we need to transition towards a lower carbon, cognizant that this is a process. It has aspects of sustainable development. It also has requirements for the intersection that we need to appreciate on environmental, on energy, as well as economic considerations. I'll be that broad. With regard to the second part, to the latter part of your question, on what is needed domestically to ensure alignment between international commitments and national as well as subnational, I can state just 2 points quickly there to say that we have an NDC that articulates, progression in line with internationally, multilaterally agreed rules under UNFCCC, but also to pursue ambition as well. That has been the case in terms of the first NDC as well as its update, and we hope to pursue the same, principles. But coming domestically, we view this to be premised on policies that are partly already existing in other sectors. So there are policy drivers that are led in other sector departments, like integrated resource plan, carbon tax, national energy efficiency strategy, green transport strategy, and various others, right? So that balance then becomes very important. The last point is that it is essential that there be a clear disaggregation. We need to go beyond just priorities and move towards, a detailed investment plan that can sort of, attract investors, that can sort of, gear investments and efforts towards, high impact kind of priorities to those key sectors. The overriding indicator for us is that we need to deal with, this must contribute to reducing unemployment, to reducing poverty, but to also reduce inequality. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stiliki. I think really pertinent points on the need for sort of plans to look at the dual needs of reducing inequality, meeting developmental needs, while also ensuring energy security and meeting climate goals. Maybe I'll sort of turn to Mr. Buta right now. A similar question to you, but just sort of as a context for our audience as well. In the recent past, President Prabowo has made ambitious announcements on on Indonesia's net zero trajectory. He's announced his aim to bring forward the net zero target, coal phase out by 2040 last year at the G20 in Brazil. And more recently, around the BRICS summit, he sort of spoke about his goal to reach 100% renewables by 2040 and sort of, if not 2035 itself. However, some of the domestic policies are yet to align with the president's vision. We also understand that the comprehensive investment policy plan is also undergoing an update. So, what, according to you, would be needed to ensure alignment between international commitments, national targets, to ensure aligned and accelerated implementation?
Thank you for this question, and also thank you for let's say inviting me to join this panel. Yes, indeed, our president have announced some quite ambitious plan for the renewable as well as for the coal phase out. So, but I don't remember that he mentioned that that it will be a fixed target. But he mentioned something that it would be possible with the international support. So, yeah, in government has already issued a kind of, let's say, national electricity plan, where actually trying to see how the power sector could reach the net zero target by 2060. But it could be accelerated. And then recently, just a few weeks ago, PLN, the state-owned utility company, also has issued this. A government has approved business plan of PLN for the year 2025 to 2035. In that new business plan, it shows that PLN should invest up to 52 something gigawatt of renewable. And then instead of phasing out the coal, then what PLN has planned is actually reducing the capacity of coal power plant. So, because as part of the JET, I'm from JETP Secretariat. As part of the JETP Secretariat, the initial announcement was actually that to reach the JETP target, then it should include coal phase out. But we have checked with, let's say, the partners, Indonesian partners under JETP, that actually no one would be willing to finance the compensation for the phased out of coal power plant. Just imagine, the average age of the coal power plant in Indonesia is about 13 years. So they have a contract of around 30 years. So if they have to let's say phase out their coal power plant, then who would compensate them? So that's why instead of phasing out, then what PLN plan now is actually phasing down. So that's how we could provide room for renewable. So, and then, as I mentioned, the national electricity plan that has been approved by government, it has already taken into consideration the international commitment of government to reduce the emissions by almost 50% by 2030, and then with the international support could be reduced further. So, and then when it comes to the second NDC up to 2035, the new national electricity plan have already, let's say, adjusted to meet the Indonesian commitment. So means actually, so with the existing national electricity plan, Indonesia would be able to meet the international commitment. So now the question is actually how to make it happen. So One of the concern that we had now is actually how to really provide a necessary regulation that could attract investors. So government has issued a policy, and then PLN need to, let's say, work on several, let's say, a kind of procedures and so on, so that they could do a kind of procurement of for the renewable, so that the investor could come in. So we have, for example, some received from the international investors about the renewable investment in Indonesia. One of them is really on how the power purchase agreement would be developed, how the procurement of the renewable should be designed, how frequently should be done, and so on. So there are some policy issues that need to be prepared by government, and by also that need to be implemented later on by state utility companies, so that we could really attract investors. But actually now there are some preparation by PLN, by state utility company, in the preparing the procurement for the renewables. So preparing procurement is actually preparing the tender, so that the private sector, including the investor, could come in for this renewable energy development. I'll stop here, and then yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's right, that both in terms of finance as well as finance and international support would be key in accelerating clean energy technologies and renewable energy development, which can also help in building competitiveness and preparing the country for future sustainable pathways. I'll turn to you, Mr. Prasad. India has had a really good track record in growing its renewable energy sectors. More recently, we saw the news about India achieving its 2022 NDC updated target on 50% non-fossil fuel capacity by 2030. This was 5 years before schedule. And its domestic policies also are pointing towards a more ambitious future. Earlier in the year, the Minister for New and Renewable Energy spoke about aiming for 1,800 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel capacity by 2047, pointing towards a really ambitious trajectory. So what do you think is sort of needed domestically to ensure alignment between international commitments, which seem to be a little lower than domestic ambition, national, subnational targets, such that there is aligned implementation?
Thank you. And first of all, I'm elated to be part of this esteemed panel. As you know, India has been undergoing multiple transitions. We not only are looking at energy transition, but we are looking at a rapid urbanization in the coming years. And more than 70-80% of India is going to be urbanized in the coming 15-20 years. We are also seeing changes in our workforce, labor force participation, population dynamics, falling fertility rates. So there are all kinds of transitions which are happening at the same time. And India has always taken a whole of economy approach right from the time we launched our National Action Plan on climate change in 2008-9. And though our work was focused on the 8 national missions, but action spanned beyond them also to ministries and areas and sectors which had a role to play in both mitigation and adaptation. But as you have rightly pointed out, we are doing better than we had anticipated. We have not only met our first NDC goals, we are on track, the trajectory to meet our 2025 NDC goals, both in terms of reduction in energy, GHG energy efficiency requirements, and also on renewable energy. We have also been able to increase our forest and tree covers by about 2 million tons in the last 10 years. Now, the question is, how do we plan our future pathways? And there we see that the ambition on renewables is very clear. We see that we are moving fast. We have become the 3rd largest wind producing nation installed capacity wise. We are the fourth largest in terms of solar energy, and we have more ambition still on these. But at the same time, we are looking at renewable energies. We are also looking at decentralized solutions, both in the agriculture and the residential sectors. And we are also looking for ensuring universal energy access to our citizens in the coming year. So, as far as energy transition is concerned, a lot is on the platter, and we look forward to more of support in terms of finance mobilization, finance provision internationally, as well as technology supports. But at the same time, we are also looking at domestic issues like carbon pricing, options for carbon market, and how do we use whatever we do, because if we can mitigate at lower cost, it is good for the world as a whole. And therefore we feel that in India we have a lot of option on this front, and carbon markets can play a big role in helping us in this future of transitioning to a low carbon economy. So that is how we are looking at it right now, and I'm sure that our next NDC and the future plan, the net zero goal that we have put through, will surely be achieved in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad. And I'll turn to you, Mr. Coleman. The million-dollar question, and what Vibhuti also mentioned in her opening remarks, we need actionable, investable roadmaps that can help in accelerating clean energy while meeting developmental goals as well as Paris goals. ADB has been working with countries on their JETP investment plans as well as NDC planning. Given your experience, what do you think are the sort of enabling conditions that can help in attracting finance at scale? And how can transition planning help in meeting climate and developmental goals? And if I can tag in one more question to an already complicated list of questions, what can emerging and developing economies do to shape global norms around fair access to climate finance?
Thank you, Majuran, and thank you for the invite to join the panel. So first of all, I mean, I think to start, I mean, I think transition risk as a concept itself is quite a sort of often neglected concept in the narrative, and it needs to be increasingly sort of central to economic planning. I mean, transition risk for countries. I mean, we heard previously that developing economies have multiple crises, right? Or not crises, but are dealing. Their policy planning has to sort of marry up multiple different agendas, and so basically, transition risk isn't just a domestic source. It's also stemming from the sort of seismic shift in global value chains that we can see over the next decade. So I think large emerging economies need to be proactive in integrating transition risk into their macroeconomic and industrial strategies. So domestic industries need to be sort of supported to reposition themselves competitively in the low carbon global economy, whether that through technology adoption, workforce reskilling, and other sort of targeted industrial policies. So transition planning, therefore, is not just a climate imperative, it's also an economic one. So well-structured transition plans can help governments and investors navigate those uncertainties that we've heard about and identify the opportunities that are emerging in the sort of the fast changing global value chains, and critically also to mitigate risks, to bring in those and scale up those investments that are required. So it provides that framework for aligning sectoral strategies with national climate goals, and also while ensuring social and economic resilience. And on the question on attracting finance at scale to put those transition plans into action, so our developing member countries need to focus on creating those enabling environments that really reduce risks and increase bankability. There needs to be this sort of marrying up with the public policy objectives that are multiple and competing with the overriding requirement for private sector investors to make a risk-adjusted return. And central to this is to really develop a really clear implementation roadmap that really anchors the NDC threes into clear and implementable sort of plans of action. And that sort of includes sort of prioritization of investment pipelines, policy interventions to deliver the enabling environment that's needed. And these need to be actionable, identifying the sector opportunities, financing needs, and also clear established timelines for the needed reforms and investments to hit the ground. What's really important is, and this is the a whole of government approach is essential here. So climate policy really shouldn't just be viewed as the domain of environment ministries, but also ministries of finance, ministries of economy, sector ministries, of course. We need to see across the whole of government a consideration for transition fiscal climate risks through green public financial management and public investment management systems, for example, that can integrate climate considerations into budgeting and planning. For example, strengthening public-private partnership frameworks that can mobilize the private capital and share risk effectively. Sector-level transition planning, especially in the crucial sectors that have costed actions and measurable outcomes. We also need to see move towards cost-reflective tariffs and sustainable funding models to ensure long-term viability in infrastructure and services sectors. And also long-term policy certainty through legislation, regulatory clarity, and institutional stability. Also creating clear market entry points via structured procurement programs, such as renewable energy auctions that provide those long-term signals to the private sector. So these enabling conditions can build investor confidence in the country's commitment and capacity to deliver on their targets. It also can signal to development partners such as MDBs, where we can support our partners, our clients, which are developing member countries, to deliver their development priorities. In this way, I think embedded in transition planning, then embedded in national development strategies, becomes a powerful tool to align climate ambition with socioeconomic development priorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brendan. I think that sort of takes us really well into our next round as well. The need for sort of transition planning, whole of the government approach, and policy certainty, and aligned policies that can help in meeting multiple objectives of the countries while also enabling attracting investments. But before I start with the next round of questions, a request to the audience: if you have any questions, please do feel free to use the Q&A feature in the Zoom window below. And we'll try and get to a few questions towards the end of the webinar. We'll try and have about like 5-10 minutes at the end to answer questions. And panelists could also respond to the questions in the Q&A section. So please, audience, do use the Q&A feature to ask any questions, and do mention which panelists you're directing your questions to. So moving from sort of transition planning to experiences that have, especially from Indonesia and from South Africa around the JETPs. Maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Butar, this time around. Can you talk about some of the experiences that sort of the JETP process has revealed, and how can that sort of help other countries in their national transition planning processes, especially when looking at both growing clean energy and working on phasing down fossil fuels?
Yeah, thank you for this question. We have made some experiences in the development of the so-called JETP scenario. So we discussed with government, we discussed with the state utility company, with all these stakeholders that let's say could help us in preparing the scenario, integrating all the plan that has been prepared by various stakeholders actually into the scenario. The first thing that we have realized is actually that before you make a kind of commitment, let's say in case of Indonesia, for example, last time Indonesia agreed with the partners to reduce the to let's say limit the emissions of the power sector to 290 million tons of CO2 by 2030. And then after looking at all of this let's say scenario that have been developed by government and others, we found out that actually it would be very difficult to really achieve this kind of target. The reason is because the basis for developing the let's say the agreed target was not strong enough. For example, we found out that the target for let's say or the data for the scenario that has been developed or that has been included as part of the negotiation for the CAPTE that is not connected to the grid was actually not based on sufficient data. Because when we start, for example, studying the total captive power that is existing, it was already about 25 giga, and it was not considered in the initial let's say negotiations. So that's why when we have a kind of a difficult time to let's say discuss with government, discuss with international partners, with partners and so on determining what should be the target. So that's why at the end we only agreed to focus on grid. So the first lesson that we could let's say suggest to others, if you would really want to go to such a kind of partnership, start with the calculation of number first. That means doing a proper study before you really agree on something. So that's the first thing. The second thing I mentioned before, one of the very important let's say step in the let's say implementing JETP is really how the procurement of renewable energy is done, because the promised or the pledge financing would only be can only be mobilized if there is a project. If there is no project, of course, the funding cannot be mobilized. So, and then to get the project, let's say procured and so on, then we need to have a kind of let's say a proper PPA. So all in all, procurement, proper PPA, and so on, let's say come actually hand in hand together. So that's the second point. The third point that I need to mention is actually we have to look at the terms, or is it the financing that would be offered by let's say financial institution as part of the JETP ecosystem? Is it actually just a business as usual financing, or is there any special about it? We found out that actually the financing offered is actually not really offering much benefit to the game. So we have expected actually there would be a lot of grant to be provided by through the collaboration, through the partnership, so that we could, for example, finance even just transition effort, so or finance the project preparation and so on. But in fact, we don't have it. So or we have only limited financing. So at least these three issues: financing, preparation of project, and also the numbers when starting the project. That would be the first thing that we need to let's say discuss before we really make some amendments. That I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think really concise 3 lessons on having a good understanding of the sector's preparation of projects and looking at the terms of financing. And maybe move to you, Mrs. Teleki. South Africa was one of the first countries to get into the JETP partnerships. What are some of the lessons that you think would be helpful? And, what was similar and different, what worked well in the South African context, what could have been done better?
But thanks for the question and for the views that have been expressed by the colleague. I do share some of the views personally, but let me open by saying that JETP in our case is led under the presidency's office. So that institutional location of where JETP is being dealt with is important. But this is done in partnership or together with other ministers through some kind of through an interministerial, committee. That's the institutional location of JETP in our case. You may have observed that in terms of the draft NDC that we have put out for 2035, we have indicated JETP to be one of those vehicles. Whilst JETP may not necessarily be that perfect when you look at it structurally, because in terms of the structural composition, when you check the element for grants, guarantees, loans, and so forth, you'll observe that in our case, the grants, are there's a very, very low, percent. But that presents an opportunity for us, to learn and see how we improve the negotiation on these vehicles. The second element is that in terms of the JETP scope because the ministers, they led a process in which there had to be a development of the JETP investment plan. So there has to be a corresponding plan which articulates, a deliberate, step in the direction of what key priorities. For instance, you'll observe that in our case, it's directed at green, initiatives, including in the electricity sector, new energy vehicle sector, green hydrogen, cross-cutting investments, is the broad, kind of scope. I think Brandon had partly indicated some of the risks, where he alluded to the transition risks and so forth. The Just Investment Plan in our case, apart from the transition risk, it talks of some of the climate risks, facing South Africa, and it paints, a macro picture in terms of what, those are, be it whether physical risks, social, as well as transition risks, which Brandon had partly, articulated. So that's important. But I think JETP is not the only game in town, as you observe in the draft NDC, because we advocate for greater access. We landed an outcome in Baku COP29 on the new collective quantifiable goal by 2035 and so forth. So we view that to be one such other avenue that should enable us, to access. So we call for greater access, but that greater access can better be positioned when we have, clear plans, when we have clear priorities, including through this JETP investment plan. So a broad generalized plan is not sufficient. We need to take it, to a clear, detailed kind of, setup. The point that the colleague has just indicated from Indonesia, one of the key aspects on JETP when you come to loans, because you would have preferred high concessionality, for instance, because we are a developing country. You may call us emerging, but when you look into, for instance, the GDP of my country, which has been, on a very low growth, over a long period of time. So the concessionality of these loans become important, such that what is desired is that which is below the prevailing, capital market rates. That can give better meaning, to JETP. Let me end at that, but the key of what I underscore is the institutional setup for this in terms of where it's located, the deliberate plan that should be, and that JETP provides a continuous learning, process. It's not the only game in town. There are other avenues and channels that can enable us to deploy our climate action in broad. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for sort of summarizing that succinctly. I'm tempted to move to Mr. Coleman right now with a couple of finance questions also coming your way. What role do you think that MDBs could play, MDBs and climate funds can play in broadening access to finance, concessional finance, and non-debt instruments for emerging and developing economies?
Thank you. So, I mean, clearly one of the most critical contributions that MDBs can make is supporting in the structuring and deploying concessional and blended finance. So we can combine grants, guarantees, and concessional loans to leverage commercial capital and by improving the risk return profiles of climate projects. This is particularly true in cases where there are sort of the high upfront costs or the risks or risk perceptions in certain markets are sort of putting off private investors. So NDBs and climate funds also play a key role in developing and scaling non-debt instruments as well, as you say. I mean, ADB is quite active in this area, for example, through venture capital to scale innovative green companies. We have our ADB Ventures Fund, which looks to sort of provide that growth capital for early green companies. Also in guarantees and insurance products that can mitigate different sort of categories of risk. For example, our Asia Pacific Climate Finance Fund, or ACLIF, is supporting, the development of innovative financial risk management products, including insurance-based instruments, again, to mobilize the commercial capital into climate projects. We also are sort of utilizing different loan modalities. So, for example, results-based financing that kind of reward verified emissions reductions. And also in carbon finance, we have a climate action catalyst fund, for example, which is purchasing mitigation outcomes on behalf of financing partners, which can provide a really crucial source of viability gap funding. And of course, technical assistance grants is also vital, right? So to support those planning, policy development, and project preparation needs of our partners. The TA platform, for example, that I work on, NDC Advance, is exactly doing this, providing support to our developing member countries on climate investment planning and aligning those with NDC targets to operationalize them. So part of this is making our capital work more efficiently. I mean, we have in 2023 we approved a capital management reforms that actually unlocked $100 billion in new funding capacity over the next decade to address the region's overlapping and simultaneous development priorities. So that was achieved by optimizing ADB's prudential level of capitalization and while sort of protecting our AAA credit rating. So it gave us more lending headroom. We're also working with our donors to increase the highest level of concessionality through our Asian Development Fund replenishment, so ADF14 replenishment, which actually was 22% higher than our ADF13. So that provides more concessional funding for TA and project development to our member countries. And also it's important that we ensure that we, through our corporate targets, we're also achieving or sort of responding to our developing member countries' key priorities that we have, for example, set in our 2030 strategy to commit $100 billion of cumulative climate finance to 2030, and also for climate finance to reach 50% of our total annual committed financing volume by 2030. So that just really sort of channels the way that we do business and engage with our clients. I'll leave with that. Thank you, Imogen.
Thank you so much. And I think there are also some sort of related questions, Brendan, for you in the chat around, where if you could sort of talk about some of the examples of where such sort of planning has helped, and that would be really helpful. But maybe you could take that in the chat. I will move to you, Mr. Prasad. So given sort of the different experiences of countries as well, how do you think India can improve its transition planning process? And what are some of the routes for mobilizing finance at scale for accelerating clean energy transitions? Do you think sort of country platforms are a possible solution? And to just weave in a question additionally from the chat as well, what are some of the sort of policy or legislative challenges that India needs to address in this transition?
Thank you. And I think my co-panelists have highlighted some of the key concerns that developing and emerging economies have in this transition phase. Before I delve into the question, I would like to point three things. One is that when we are talking of transition, we should also be looking at challenges in the adaptation sector, in loss and damage, in challenges that we face due to sea level rise, in glacier melting, in urban flooding. So there is a requirement of transition in those areas also, which affects the day-to-day life of the citizens. The second is that when we are talking of transitions, we are only looking at the supply side, but we should also look at the demand side. Now, the question is that if we have unsustainable kind of pattern of living and consumption patterns, or unsustainable production methods, it is going to lead to problems in the coming years. So therefore, this entire spectrum of what we consume, how we consume the resources, and what are the production methods, circularity, all these aspects become very important. And somehow I find that the discussions on transition focus more on energy and renewables and just transition, ignoring many of these other basic facets of transition, which are as important and may play a bigger role in the coming years. For example, one of the studies that we did in CEW showed that by 2070, the kind of contribution that we have from life movement started by our Honorable Prime Minister would contribute to about 14 to 25% reduction in emissions, which is quite a substantial reduction to come from many of the interventions which are not driven by policy. It is people-centric, it is driven by citizens. So coming back to your question on finance, I think India has largely financed its transition in energy terms from domestic sources. And the role of grants and incentives have been rather limited. We find that we have few projects from the Green Climate Fund, few projects from Adaptation Fund, but otherwise in terms of the large climate windows, we don't see so much of flows. We have loans or other things coming from World Bank or ADB. In the days to come, I think policy certainty, vision, policy frame in case of India is very clear. We have a vision for 2047. We want to become a developed countries by 2047, the 100th year of our independence centenary. And there, each and every sector has been reflected. Each and every ministry has put a draft plan for how we are going to achieve this transition. How are we going to, what we are going to do to reach this goal by 2047. So we have some plans in place, but then these have to be matched by financial opportunities, have to be matched by financial flows, and both domestic and international flows will have to play a very important role in this. As far as the question was concerned about the policy and legislative framework, we have a very robust system. We have draft policies for auctions. We have draft policies for our energy planning. We have long-term vision for solar, for wind, for all different sources of energy. And these are backed by the government in all its pronouncements, in all its decisions, and in all possible manners. So I think that as far as the long-term planning is concerned, India is very much on track. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad. I think like the key sort of points that have come from this round of section is, especially when your countries are looking to do transition planning, having doing studies, looking at detailed sectoral transition plans, having the right governance structure, taking a whole of the economy effort and involving different stakeholders can help in both presenting a clear direction of travel as well as make these plans investable. We've got about 6 minutes remaining in our webinar, so maybe I'll ask a similar, a quick round of sort of question for all the panelists. Given that this has been a sort of difficult geopolitical context, what do you think can be achieved at COP30 and potentially at G20 to show that there's no backsliding on commitments, particularly around tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency by 2030 and transitioning away from fossil fuels by mid-century? And what signs of leadership are needed from the developed and emerging economies, particularly from India, Indonesia, Brazil, and South Africa? Maybe I'll come to you again, Mrs. Teleki, because you'd mentioned that you may have to drop off a little earlier. So I'll come to you, Mrs. Teleki, for a quick response to this.
Oh, thanks. Can you see me? Oh, sorry, there's a time delay in terms of my camera. Yeah, thanks for the question. Indeed, it's quite a period during which there's a lot, going on. But what we uphold is multilateralism. That in the spirit of multilateralism, the global challenges that we are faced with can only be solved, multilaterally. And as South Africa will remain steadfast and committed, to the multilateral processes, including, on climate change. And specifically on COP20, key of the paramount issues is still the issue of finance, the 1.3 trillion by 2035. How do we mobilize that? How do we make certain that we accommodate, high concessionality on finance to developing countries, but also the obligatory, fulfillments that are at the door of developed countries, because Paris is clear that we need to be supported as developing countries. So that's one of the key aspects. And then when it comes to adaptation, under the global goal on adaptation, because we are highly vulnerable as developing countries, yet we have contributed least, to the climate challenge we are faced with. The finalization of the Belém work program, that should be focusing on indicators. We have a lot of indicators that needs to be narrowed even to less than 100 if possible. And we'll be pleased if that gets financed. On aspects of mitigation, ambition, how mitigation gets supported and funded in developing countries, how blended finance can also be availed over and above the loans. How do we deal with these aspects that the colleague from India highlighted on just transition? There's a dedicated program on just transition work program, UAE just transition work program. Brandon had called for the fact that we need to be deliberate and plan, including in terms of our macroeconomics, on how just transition is financed, transition finance. That is the space to express such finance. And there's been backtracking on the part of many developed countries in this regard. We hope for progress in that regard. The same applies with loss and damage, finance, how disbursements, coming from the loss and damage fund that was, adopted during COP28 in UAE, the structural arrangements in that regard, including the boards and so forth. But the impacts are scaling up and escalating, and we hope that there will be progress in that regard. Of course, there's many other issues, including transparency, gender as well. They are just as equally important. On G20, we hope that as the presidency of the G20, we'll be able to advance a number of outcomes, including how best can we also discuss aspects of new collective quantified goals under G20. Yes, the outcome has to come under UNFCCC. I need to be careful when I express this point. All I'm saying is that that provides a platform on how we can engage further, but without necessarily expecting an outcome to be finalized under G20, but that outcome is expected under UNFCCC. I'll take a pause there, and thanks for the opportunity. I'll have to jump off. It's been a pleasure being in this panel. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Steleki. Thank you so much for the remarks. I'll come to you, Mr. Buttar, for your final thoughts and response to the question.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Steleki has already expressed a lot of things related his expectation from COP. Actually, I have similar expectation from Mr. Steleki, because I see the key for that need to be looked at in the COP is actually financing. What is the financial commitment from the developed countries towards the mitigation, adaptations, and so on for the in the emerging economy or these developed countries? And as I mentioned before, the key to the energy transition is really financing. One of the key, I would not say that's one of the keys, really financing, and it should not be only a business as usual financing, but really it should be a kind of let's say financing with the low interest, combined with grant, as has already been provided by some of the MDBs and so on, and then it will only help us in, let's say, transitioning from let's say fossil-based energy to the renewable. And in our case, for example, when a lot of critics come from international, including from developed countries to the developing countries, in particular about the use of coal in the provision of the energy, it should not only be critics, but it should accompany with providing support. So, but this is the thing that missing sometimes. Under the jet fee, for example, ADB managed about 2.59 billion for the coal phase out in Indonesia. But what are other missing money that we need in order, if international would like us to go further with the coal phase out? So because a lot of things that is still missing actually, whether we really can replace all of the coal power plant in Indonesia with renewable. What is about our energy security and so on? That's all the issues that need to be addressed in COP. So another thing that we need to address in COP is also about how to operationalize the Article 6. So it is a bit funny, for example, in the negotiation about Article 6, if EU negotiate very hard on Article 6, while EU actually doesn't intend to use a credit from Article 6 for their offsetting or for their NDC. So why we let's say need to negotiate if you don't use it for your own NDC? So this is the additional thing that I would like to add to what Steleki mentioned. I'll stop here, and again, thank you very much to invite me to participate in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Buttar. And Mr. Prasad, if I could come to you for your quick remarks.
Thank you. And I think most of the points are very well covered. I would say that the global stocktake is a ratchet up mechanism, and most countries are not going to backslide on what the commitments have been earlier. India is surely one of them. And as my other colleagues have mentioned, for the COP, the Baku to Belém roadmap is the kind of success indicator. If you have a good roadmap, a roadmap which meets the need of the developing countries, we will find that the ambition has been unleashed and a lot of countries can do much more than what they have done till now. Also, the fact that climate change requires leadership of the developed countries, because historically they have benefited or they have been greater polluters on GHG emissions, and therefore that would not be sacrificed by merely saying that the current or emerging emitters have to do more. That is a fact of life, but there is a historical context to it also, which we have to take into account. And lastly, I would again reiterate that the question of implementation is linked to finance, is linked to technology transfer, is linked to capacity building in the Paris Agreement. And we must see the package as a whole. The Paris Agreement was a balance between what the developed countries wanted and what the developing countries required, and that balance must be honored. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad. And finally to you, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you. So the question is around the COP30 and G20, and yeah, sorry, I was trying to type out some answers on the Q&A section, but yeah. So I mean, first of all, I think clearly we need to demonstrate that the global climate ambition remains on track. I mean, from our work, we're currently supporting 14 different of our member countries in developing their NDC3s, and our experience is that basically we're seeing genuine ambition, not only in raising the targets, but also in strengthening the implementation frameworks and investment strategies, and really this sort of taking forward the lessons learned from NDC 2. But of course, this ambition, reflects a growing recognition that climate action is integral to long-term development. However, the Paris Agreement, of course, is grounded in the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. And with this increased ambition comes, a reasonable expectation of increased external support, a key mechanism in the Paris Agreement. So countries that are making bold commitments, their ability to deliver depends on access to finance, technology, and capacity building, and the support from development partners. But at the same time, we're seeing a growing, we're sort of led by the priorities of our member countries, and we're seeing the growing impacts of climate change on the ground. It's really leading to this, from extreme weather events to ecosystem disruption. It's placing significant strain on countries' fiscal positions. And so the climate-related shocks are sort of increasingly recognized as threats to macroeconomic stability and long-term growth. So this climate action is becoming more and more closely integrated into socioeconomic development priorities, and how we can safeguard development into the future. So sorry, I think I'll leave it there. I think we're over time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the panelists. It's been a really rich set of discussions. I'm now going to try and attempt to summarize all the conversations. That job is going to be with Purva to do. But it's been really, very useful. There's clear indication that domestically there's a lot of action that's taking place on national transition planning, but we need more attention to both adaptation as well as mitigation at domestic level for national transition plans, but also multilaterally. And more importantly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done around finance and means of implementation around technology transfers. But with this, I would thank the audience, and I will hand it over to Purva to sort of conclude the webinar.
Thank you so much, Madhura. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers for taking time from their really busy schedule to be with us here today and share such wonderful insights. Of course, we learned so much. And like Madhura said, we can't even try to summarize this. I'm going to make a weak attempt at that and just take some points that you all mentioned. I think the few key takeaways that I see is how Paul mentioned that there needs to be room for renewables. There is no two-way about it. What Indonesia is doing, it's phasing coal down. It's doing coal phase down for that. And I think other countries also need to think about how to create more room for renewables. Transition plans, of course, can help us create those actionable investment plans and roadmaps that can guide us to create that space. Brendan also very wonderfully put it by saying that transition planning is not only a climate imperative, but it's also an economic one right now. And if your transition plans are embedded in your national plans, it can really help build investor confidence and bring in the finances required to bring that change and make space for non-fossil fuel energy in this country. Mr. Prasad also, I think, by giving India's example, which was also applicable to all the other emerging economies as well, mentioned that it's not just about transition, it's also about urbanization. That's the balance we are looking at now. We are looking at urbanization, which is adaptable to the transition. There are new things that are happening. There's workforce dynamics changing, labor dynamics are changing, fertility rates are going down. And within the space of all of this, we need to sort of look at transition as well. So what is needed is a whole of economy approach. And that is something that cannot be excused at all. Mr. Stelesky also very nicely put it that for all of this, when we talk about all the changes and renewables and whole of economy approach, what we need is also concessionality of loans. That's very important. And that's where your transition plans can also help. Brendan mentioned that, MDBs like ADB can sort of help us structure and deploy concessional financing through blended finance. So I think to just just a brief sum of like what everybody has mentioned here. But of course, the recording is available on YouTube, and happy for all of us to go to our YouTube channel and have a look at the recording. If you have any more questions regarding the webinar, which you would want to ask the speakers, please do reach out to IEEFA or E3G, and we'll be happy to relay your questions to the speakers and get your answers for them. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thank you.